Hey guys, my name is Rai. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the most recent key I timed on my Preservation Evoker, and it's a plus 15 Stonevault. This key is pretty difficult when it comes to actually healing throughput and cadence, so it's pretty important that you think about a couple things. A lot of times in this key, you're going to notice I use this couple with the same combo as I talk about my other keys, my Life Bind into my Spirit Bloom. But this time, I'm going to show you guys a couple tricks that I use on E.D.N.A, Skarmorak, and as well some of the trash to make sure that my team, my tank, and myself can stay alive to make sure that we can complete this key. Like my other keys, I am using a pretty standard build. I am running Call of Ysara. I'm not running Flow States. And as well, I don't have to take Sleepwalk here because my AUG does. For those that haven't done Stonevault before, you're going to notice that as we get in here, there is a Sleepwalk skip that we can use towards the end of the key. And yeah. This first pull of the dungeon is actually quite difficult. You kind of need to use almost everything, and as you'll recognize probably from some of my other videos, I always say that the first pull of the dungeon, given that you have all healing CDs and heroism, you're completely allowed to use everything, including your obsidian skills, your renewing blaze, and your stasis, rewind, and communion to keep alive. Note that this first pull, especially on this key level, requires and involves 2 of the earth-infused golems in the pack, meaning that we do have 2 ground slams to deal with. Going into this pack, I do the same thing I always do. I tip the scales before the key starts, I fire breath, and I start ramping. As you can see, immediately I enter my stasis. I set up my stasis with Spirit Bloom, TA, and Dream Breath, and I'm healing and overhealing as much as I can during this first pull. Given our composition, we only have 1 Curse Dispel and 2 Cauterizes in this pull, meaning that if the curses go on for too long, I'm going to have to either heal them up or make sure that my team can use defensives, or I use things like Time Dilation to make sure they can stay alive. As you can see during this pull, I commit a lot here. I commit both charges of Scales, I commit Renewing Blaze, Zephyr, and Stasis to make sure we stay alive, and heal up the remaining curses that go out. For these golems, I actually tell my team always to stay in and eat all of the golem charges. One combo I really like to use here is Echo, 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 Verdant Embrace, and then use one of 2 parts of my combo. I'll use either Spirit Bloom to use the Lifebind portion, or I'll use Living Flame with a Life Spark proc. Usually the pull in this pull specifically is actually 3 golems, and I'm pinging my tank to pull all 3. As Preservation Evoker, this is actually pretty easy to handle, even when running low mastery gear and low amounts of healing. And that's because we have a very strong combo, which maybe I'll talk about in a future video, that is able to heal up like raw damage like this pretty quickly. And that's using your Echo, Echo, Echo Lifebind for the first golem hit, followed by a Life Spark proc to full top your team. And then as well, right after that, using Echo, or using that Lifebind proc from your Echo, Echo, Echo Verdant Embrace into a big Spirit Plume to top up your party. Again, now, this is actually a really safe route that my tank chose to do. We're only doing 1 golem here instead of all 3. I personally am not a fan of this. I think it was bad for our timer, but our tank did want to play safe. And to be fair, we did have some really strong DPS in this key. I played with our Shaman before and our DK, and they're both very big blasters. Again, one thing you can note too with the golems, if you are struggling, is you can LOS all of the ground slams, meaning that if you hug around the corner, you never have to actually worry about taking them. For one, personally, I always tell my range to be at max range. I know my AUG's going to be short range as well, so he's probably going to take them. But I always usually tell my melee to sit in and don't LOS just because I find it easy to heal. Personally though, I would recommend that you, if you're just beginning this dungeon or learning preservation, go max range if you can for every ground slam, and make sure that you can help your melee out with things like Time Dilation, Rewind, Emerald Communion, Echo, 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 Lifebind, Spirit Bloom, etc. E.D.N.A is the first boss of this dungeon, and it's quite difficult, but you'll notice one of 2 things that I do here. There's a cadence of 3 breaks that happen in every phase of the fight. I tell my team personally that I want to do 1, 1, 4, meaning that I do all the breaks. I'm going to break 1 on the first one, and then we're going to do 1 more on the second one, and then on the 4th one, or on the 3rd one, we're going to break all 4. The reason why I like to do this on Preservation is I find it very easy given that we have cooldowns like Stasis, Emerald Communion, and Rewind to be able to handle all the breaks. Each time one of these breaks comes out, I like to pop one of 2 things. Renewing Blaze, or I like to use Obsidian Scales. As you can see on the second break here, I'm getting everything ready. I did not pop my stasis from the first debuff, and then I release it all here, and even with 4 out, my team is completely topped and fine. I am dispelling my tank before the tank buster, as this is how he requested it to do. You might be used to having to dispel your tank instantly, but this is how our team went about it. So how do I do this for each one of these? Always on the first break of the phase, I echo, 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 and I either Spirit Bloom and Lifebind, and it's more than enough healing to get my team through the first set. One of the most important things I would recommend is on the second set before the third break, before the big AoE and the slam, is that you save your Lifebind. And what you're going to notice here, the second is I put my echoes out, I'm healing, dispelling my tank, and here we go. I Spirit Bloom instead of Lifebind. And now in most keys I tell you guys that you should be doing Lifebind first, but the reason why is here, I end up using Lifebind and I end up using Emerald Communion. The reason why is because there's such a short amount of time between the second and third slam. I want to make sure that I have my stronger heal, which is Lifebind, instead of my weaker heal, which is just a big Spirit Bloom or Raw Echo in my party. So again, the first one here, I think I end up using Lifebind because it's the first one, we have plenty of time before them. So I use Lifebind, I use Spirit Bloom, and we top my party. So this next one, kind of the same thing, is I'm thinking about, okay, what do I have next? I used Communion in the last one. My Stasis is back, but I also have Rewind. So I'm going to go for a break here. I go in, I echo, 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 and I set up my Stasis, and I use my Tip the Scale Spirit Bloom to get everybody topped. I use Temporal Anomaly, I Lifebind, and then I release my Stasis. Again, you can see, especially when you have your Lifebind combo in that final break, it doesn't matter how many you take, you have so much healing preservation. And again, my stats are very, haste focused right now, so I don't run a lot of mastery, but you absolutely just top your party. I don't think I've ever been really scared on this fight, other than maybe sometimes with the tank. This first one, I just chose the Spirit Bloom, even though it was the first one in the rotation. I don't think it mattered too much, but, again, we're going to see what I do next here. The boss is at 126 mil. I think I have one more break left. And I'm like, oh shit, I gotta break one more crystal. So I'm putting some echoes out. I'm a little worried about my tank, but I do start card casting a Spirit Bloom. My Shaman does get double tick there, kind of out of my control. He waits, and I Lifebind. I Rewind, and we're back at it. At this point, I'm a little worried for my tank. This is a no comms bug. We haven't really said too much. I think I'm in Discord just with our Shaman, just to kind of hanging out. But at this point, I know I don't have to commit a lot because we have no more breaks in the fight. So I just have to make sure that my team can stay alive through this. So at this point, you can see I'm not really ramping. I'm not really doing anything. I'm just killing the boss. This was about a 1.5 million HPS fight. Again, from my opinion, once you get in the cadence of it, I don't think this fight is difficult. But I think where Evokers actually struggle more is if they try to do weird things to the breaks. I think breaking 114 is very, very easy on preservation, and you can handle all the breaks yourself that way, only breaking one crystal and looking over your team. This pull immediately after first boss is hard. I immediately send out echoes before the pull even starts. I like to end up using a Zephyr there if I can, and making sure that I have tons of healing on my team and my tank. Anytime you're fighting a Despoiler, you should know that about 4 or 5 seconds after it pulls, it's going to start doing a pulsing AoE, meaning that you should have some sort of ramp going on, whether it's a TA, whether you have echoes out for a Lifebind, or something like Emerald Communion or Rewind. You'll see that every time I fight a Despoiler, which is 3 times in this key, I have a big ramp going right away, right on the start. I'd also recommend doing things like rotating your Obsidian Scales and your Renewing Blaze for these encounters. Again, my comp only has 1 decurse, which is kind of difficult for me, but that's okay. Our Shaman is really good at decursing, and I'm doing my best to make sure I can keep everybody alive through this. So far, our timer is good. We only have 1 death, and we're on our way to the Machinists. The front loader and a lot of the trash in here is another one of those times where I recommend trying to keep things ready to go just in case things go wrong. The loader does do a really nasty debuff on our team member here, and I'm going to be watching as it goes to my Shaman. He doesn't have Bulwark, and he doesn't have Astral Shift, so I set up my Stasis. I set up my Tip the Scales, and I start giving him a ton of healing, making sure I have all my hots on him and giving him any passive healing I can while I damage this pack. The front loader debuff, again, is something you can use Rescue on, you can use Time Dilation on, and don't be afraid to use things like Emerald Communion if you think you don't have enough single target healing to make sure you can handle this mechanic. This one goes to my Shaman again, he gets an AMZ, and immediately you can see there, he is Bulwark, and I Time Dilate him. I'm waiting to see too if I need to rescue him, but I want to make sure that in case we got another one, we have enough externals to be able to go out. If it did go on him again, that would be kind of scary. This trash specifically is just a ton of tank damage. So as you can see, I set up my Stasis, I use my Spirit Bloom, my TA, and my Dream Breath. There are casters in here doing passive damage, so I want to make sure I have enough healing set up to be able to heal with all of the damage going out of this pool on my tank and my group. All this hallway, I feel like you can get away with just, making sure you keep your tank alive, helping them kite, using things like your tail whip and your wing buffet, as well as pressing roar to make sure that maybe you get a capacitor totem out there, and anything you can do to make sure that your team can get through this part of the encounter. I really like preservation in this dungeon. I think it's a ton of fun, and I think there's a lot of things that you can do really, really well. I think the hardest part of this dungeon for preservation is Skarmorak, but there are ways to handle it. Just the constant big burst AoE that's kind of sporadic can sometimes make it hard to ramp. But this next boss is, again, a really, really, really good pres fight, and I really enjoy it. Our shaman does go down there to threat on the rip, which is really unfortunate. It looks like he just only hit a melee. It wasn't Tempest or anything, but as you'll see, I'm doing a lot of group healing here and tank healing, meaning that I get my Spirit Bloom out, I put my TA out, and I put my double Dream Breath out on this trash. Some of you might ask, Bri, why aren't you doing things like, setting up your life bind here? And my answer to you is this is a lot of sporadic damage. One of you that were watching my videos asked, hey, I know some trash you don't life bind a lot versus bosses where you always do, and it's one of those combos you really love. Life bind is very, very, very good when you can predict the damage and on who, but it's very costly to set up, takes lots of globals, and sometimes might not actually be your best use of resource. As you can see here, I'm just constantly just doing pad healing, right? Making sure everybody's topped so that if they take 2 alloy bolts they could survive. Setting up my stasis just for my tank, and basically my whole purpose here is keeping my tank alive. My team's just getting the passive heals. But again, if you need to use rewind or communion here, definitely do. I don't think this next boss is that difficult, and you'll see why in a couple minutes. But this trash can be really, really deadly for your tank, and making sure that you can do things like stops and team healing is a good idea. This next pull is really funny if I remember this correctly. So Jazzy ends up using Spatial on me here. And I end up using Tip the Scale, or I use Fire Breath here, and because I'm spatialed, it pulls that pack on the left. And now in our comp right now, we don't have a Night Elf, so we can't skip anything at the end, meaning that this is a ton of mobs. And, the nice thing is we have to get Lust on cooldown, so I think we end up lusting this here. We do. Well, I do. We're not in comms, so I just decided, hey, we're going to lust this. This is a ton of mobs, so I'd rather do this than the boss. Yeah, this does put us over count a little bit, but, we do get full value here. We have Ascendance from our Shaman, we have Breath from our DK, and this pack just kind of falls over. I think the Lust actually might have been overkill, but it does get it on cooldown, and does allow us to get another Lust in this dungeon. One thing I would recommend to your teams, and this is more just a general M+ thing, is you don't always have to use Lust off CD. You can use it any time in which you're not going to lose one. So I knew that we had, we Lust on the very first pull, and we are about, 12 minutes in the key, meaning that we can get 3 more. So I wanted to make sure that we used it before our timer ticked down, and we lost that extra Lust from that 4 minutes in the dungeon. This dungeon, or this boss, you're going to notice I do a lot of the same things I usually talk about. Anytime that the exhaust vents come out, I'm going to be ramping. And what am I going to be ramping? It's going to be Echo, 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 Bird Embrace, Spirit Bloom. This part of the fight, you can do a lot of damage on Prez. There's not really a lot going on. And this fight, I'm just watching to make sure that my tank has defensive for each one of these. And I'm ramping. So Echo, Echo, Echo. Stasis, Tip the Scale, Spirit Bloom, TA, Dream Breath, and my team is topped. You're going to notice what I do here is I actually don't release my Stasis because I'm going to end up using it for the next exhaust vents, right? My Fire Breath alone and my passive Hots from my last ramp are basically topping and ticking my party. So again, exhaust vents, Echo, Echo, Burn Embrace, and then I release my Stasis here, and my party is topped. So again, on Prez, low mastery, high haste, very simple combo will top your party every single time on this. What I do recommend though is making sure you also alternate things like your Renewing Blaze and your Obsidian Scales. I personally like Obsidian Scales for the Blazing Crescendo phase, and then I like to life bind this part of the fight. So again, I life bind here, I Spirit Bloom, and my team is topped. So we use a Zephyr here, and then I do commit a charge of Obsidian Scales. I Dream Breath, and I top my party. I'm looking at the next exhaust fence, which is 4 seconds. This is one of the harder overlaps of the fight, so I do decide to start ramping here in a second. I use Echo, Echo, Burn Embrace, and then I go into my Communion. Oh, sorry, my Rewind. I think I actually did make a mistake there. I thought in my head I was supposed to commune, and then maybe it was on cooldown, but it didn't really matter. The output was the same, the outcome was the same, so now in this next one, I know that I have one more mold vents maybe before the boss is dead, or exhaust vents. So Echo, Echo, Echo. I Burn Embrace, and this time I use my health pot into my Spirit Bloom, and my party is stopped. Again, another trick that I really like to do is if you are in kind of a little bit of a pickle, like meaning you can't stop and move, using your Echo, 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 Verdant Embrace, and then using a healing potion, basically the Algarium healing potions you buy off the auction house, are going to contribute to your lifeline effect. Meaning that, as you can see there, I did Echo, 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 Verdant Embrace, Algari healing potion, and it actually topped up my team. Below my middle bar, as you can see, I have my action tracker back and set up, so those of the Twitch that have asked for it can actually see it now, and I think hopefully that you can get a little bit of a takeaway from that. So over here, our Og does sleepwalk this aspiring 4chan, and we're on our way to the other side of the dungeon. On this trash, we're back to doing a pretty simple healing pattern routine. You're going to have to deal with decurses, you're going to have to deal with a little bit of rot healing, and the most important thing is that there's going to be some casts that go off, and they're these cogwheels. One thing I would note that's very, very important is if your tank gets targeted by the cogwheels, they are dispellable, and you should make sure you prio dispel your tank, especially if they're prop paladin ASAP. The reason why is your prop paladin cannot cast Wog, he cannot cast spells because he will be silenced. So you can see I have one coming to me on here, possibly healing up my team, and whenever I can, using that global to dispel my party members. I do set up a stasis on this pack, which is actually a big mistake. As I told you guys earlier, that every time I fight a Despoiler, which I know is going to be in the next pack, I want to make sure that I have some sort of healing ramp available to make sure that they could stay alive. I do get silenced, my Shaman's cursed, but he does decurse himself. And I'm using some pretty passive healing just to keep my team alive. Using things like Echo Reversion for a golden hour effect, my tank. So here, again, right away, I know within a couple seconds, I'm going to have to deal with a Despoiler, right? So I Zephyr, Echo, 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 Renewing Blaze, tip the scales, Spirit Bloom. Oh, I don't even tip the scales here. Guess it was not, but same idea is that I want to make sure that I have some sort of defensive and ramp going for every single Despoiler. My tank, I know, is getting absolutely tossed on this as well, so I'm watching him to make sure if he needs time dilation. Right now he has Bubble, Wings, Lay on Hands, Kings, and a lot of buttons to be able to get through, but I'm keeping a close attention to him. Here's the second outburst, here's my ramp, my Echo, 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 Spirit Bloom, and my team is stopped. Again, we have no communication in this key, so I'm doing whatever I can to make sure that I overcompensate for my team right now. I don't know what my tank's going to do. I don't know what my Og's going to do. I don't know what my DK's going to do. But we do go into our next spoiler pack here. I do time dilate my tank on the rip, and he bubbles off the stagger after, which is good. I do go into my stasis, Echo, 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 Burden Embrace, Spirit Bloom, TA, and Dream Breath. This pack's getting absolutely nuked. I don't even think I get a second spoiler cast, which is awesome. Which means, unfortunately, I did waste my stasis, but I don't really think about that like that. I made sure I had my stasis for a contingency. So right now, I'm just kicking the censoring gear when I can. Again, getting kicked, it's fine, and healing up this pack. Before you start Skarmorak, I would implore you to try to have as much mana as possible. This can be a kind of costly fight for your mana, as you're going to be doing a lot of TA spending, a lot of Echo spending, and a lot of big healing. One trick on Skarmorak is to not overcommit. You have two very, very powerful abilities that have longer cooldowns in your toolkit, which are Spirit Bloom and Dream Breath, and you need to make sure that you have them for the times that actually matter. When thinking about Skarmorak, you need to deal with two phases of the fight. You need to deal with the passive rot damage in the first fight from people picking up orbs and exploding ads, and then you're going to have to deal with the shield. My advice to you is always ramp during this part of the fight, and then pop on the shield. If you do have a Frost DK, this fight can be really easy, but you need to make sure that you always have at least something for every shield, whether it be Stasis pre-ramped, your Emerald Communion, or your Rewind. As you'll see here, I'm doing really, really passive light healing on this part of the fight. I life bind as late as I can, watching the crystal health to make sure that I get enough healing out. And here, I set up my Spirit Bloom when the ad dies. As you can see, my DPS are starting to get the orbs, and I'm starting to make sure I have enough passive healing on them to keep them alive. I haven't set up my Stasis yet. I do hit Renewing Blaze here just to help out with my passive healing, but it ends up being a misplay because I barely take anything. So here's my TA. I rescue my DK. I go into my life bind here, or my Spirit Bloom. This is with my Stasis. I Dream Breath. And I Verdant Embrace. So now, on this part of the fight, because we broke the shield so quickly with our damage, our DK saved Breath, our Shaman saved Ascendance, now I have a full Stasis for this part of the fight. This works out really nice, meaning that I can blow my Stasis here, just do passive healing as much as I want, and be as greedy as possible, letting my team drop a little bit, because I know I have a full ramp Stasis that I can release at any time. So there's my Stasis, and I have all my HOTS rolling on my team. Again, I'm trying to get echoes out as much as possible, and anytime there's any spot damage in the fight, I'm just healing it up. I can see my DK's got 4 stocks already. He needs a little bit of attention, and so I start using some single target healing on him. I'm getting a little scared here. I ended up rewinding before the phase, which was actually a mistake on my part, but all that matters is people stay alive here, and end up also committing Emerald Communion. I see my DK is 7 stacks, and I'm kind of worried about him a little bit. I Spirit Bloom, and at that point, if we had another tick, I would have been back into Echo, Verdant Embrace. I had Time Dilation available, and I had Zephyr and Renewed Blaze. However, you don't want to overcommit to any one of these phases, because if you do, it could mean the next phase is really scary. I know now that the only thing I have coming back is Stasis in 9 seconds. My mana's okay, I'm using Echoes, and I no longer have Emerald Communion or Rewind. So again, a lot of passive healing out here. I'm watching my DK, who now already has 5 stacks. And one of you might ask me why I don't get a lot of stacks in this fight. I try to get one, but honestly, I just never feel like I need it on Prez. I have so much output that it just doesn't matter. I'd rather my DPS get as many as possible and blow up the shield. If you are struggling in this fight, however, I would tell your team that they can absolutely, let you take 1 or 2. I would not recommend taking more than 2, as I find it actually gets more difficult to heal the more you take. But you can see here, right, like every single phase, like the more my DPS I have, the less I have to worry about healing, and I absolutely know I have the throughput on every single one to make it through 2, 3, or even 4 ticks. I would recommend though, if you don't have this competition, you don't have a DK, if you're running like Enhanced Shaman Rogue, or if you just don't have a DK in general, you could be running any comp, and the shields are dying slow, and maybe you're progressing this boss for the first time, tell your team that you need to pick up an orbit too. I really, really, really recommend this, and I think it's really imperative. Again, the boss is almost dead. I've used all my healing buttons, and I'm completely okay to move on to the next part of the dungeon. Not a hard fight. I was pretty top the mana at the end, but I did have mana pots. I did still have rescue. I took the skills coming up. I probably could have healed another phase very easily. So in this composition and in some of the hierarchies, most people like to skip these 2 honor guards. They'll pull them to the side with a Night Elf, a Hunter, a Mage, or a Rogue, and then they'll Shadow Meld. However, we do not have a meld in our team, so we do have to fight these. This ended up being a really slow part of the dungeon for us. I'm really not a fan of fighting 2 mobs ever in Mythic Plus, but, again, this is a no comms pug. I don't really have much to say. We're going to sit here and fight these honor guards for a minute. I think at one point my tank just decides here that enough's enough and he's going to chain, which didn't really make too much sense to me, but... So now my tank decides to go into the big rock hulk here. One thing to note is, again, when you're fighting this trash, your tank is going to get absolutely smashed, and so is your team. There's going to be alloy bolts going out from the Mender, so help kick where you can. I used Uproar there to make sure my team is topped, and immediately I'm in Renewing Blaze and Scales for the first Golem smash. I used Tip the Scales here with my Stasis and end up ramping a full Stasis here to make sure that my team can handle the oncoming damage and my tank stays alive. This is a very, very, very big tank damage pull, so you want to make sure that when you're sitting and doing this pull, you have tons of healing out. I'm watching the timer on my nameplate of my Rock Smasher and making sure that I have passive healing out as well. I do have echoes on everybody here, and I'm ready to Lifeline ramp. The smash is coming. I use Verdant Embrace, and immediately I release my Stasis, so it looks like we don't even take damage at all. The thing is here, I want everybody to be topped at all times, always, especially on this pull, so I'm using everything I can as needed to make sure my tank stays alive and my team stays alive. My tank does end up dying here, I think. I think he gets hits by a charge. And we do have a hiccup, but you know, other than that, right, like I'm watching him right now, I know that he has Kings, his wings come back up, lay on hands, and I do have Time Dilate. I don't think he's in danger, but there you go. Danger was online and inevitable. So we do have a couple deaths here, we do battle res our tank, and he's trying his best to get aggro back on all these things. I think our Shaman does release. Very unfortunate death, but our timer's fine. Like, we've been blasting through the ski, not too many issues, and yeah. I do Time Dilate our DK trying to keep him alive. He does instantly go TD red and almost dies, but it does manage to save him. TD is such a strong external, and I recommend if you're not using it, use it more, especially when you're DPSF threat. I feel like your tank's dying. It's like the ultimate recovery button, having a 50% damage reduction on somebody. In my head, I would have never pulled this like this. I would have waited to kill the frontal guys. Like, our timer's still more than fine, but on these packs too, you guys have to be very careful about kicking the Stonevaults. Even on Preservation, making sure you use your utility like Tail Whip, Wing Buffet, Pressing Roar for a Cap Totem, and kicking where you can is very important. Your tank can absolutely get nuked on these packs, and giving him a lot of passive healing helps him as well. Again, you'll notice too that I set up a Stasis there just for my tank. It's completely fine to use anything here you want on these packs to make sure your tank's kept alive. If you need to use Rewind, Emerald Communion, Tip the Scales, Time Dilate, or anything in your kit, I'd recommend doing it. Onto these packs again, it's the same thing. We're going to focus the Rock Smasher. If we have Globals or Life Spark procs, we can hit the totems. I immediately hit a Zephyr there, I Verdant Embrace, and I top up my party with a Life Spark proc. My Shaman and my DK are getting fervented by the bolts. Not ideal right now, but I'm just healing it up where I can. And I'm making sure that my tank always has something on him, whether it's, you know, 2 reversions for Grace Period, Time Dilate, my Dream Breath, or something. But as you'll see, every time a Rock Smash comes out, I start ramping, Echo, 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 Verdant, and this time I do another combo with the same thing, my Life Spark proc and my Living Flame, and my team's mostly topped. Another common question I've been asked is when to actually use the whole, you know, Life Bind into Life Spark proc or Living Flame. I think there's some conversation around going like you shouldn't be Living Flame in your party. And keys, I think that's really wrong. I think you have a lot of buttons for a lot of different situations, but if you ever need to, it's completely fine. And I think like it's one of your most powerful instant ramps is that Echo, 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 Verdant Embrace, Life Spark proc with that Call of Ysara buff for the 100% increased Living Flame healing. And it'll top, like, especially on the golems in the first build of dungeon, topping your party faster is more important than having more throughput over time. There are a lot of times in these dungeons where your throughput does not matter whatsoever over time. It's topping your party over like seconds, like quickly. They'll go to 20%, you top them, they'll go to 20%, you top them, you go to 20%, you top them. And you guys need to figure out how you can figure out your own healing pattern that lets you account for this, right? Again, see, like on these packs, I know that my tank is just globaled. On the first pull of the dungeon, the ground pounds, I know that my team needs to be topped instantly every 2 seconds, right? And using things like Echo, 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 Verdant, Life Spark proc is going to top your team pretty quickly from 0 to 100. Same thing with your healing potion, same thing with your communion, your Spirit Bloom, and sometimes Dream Breath is just too slow, so take that as you may. There are a lot of different ways you can heal encounters on Prez, so don't overstress it and don't think too much. Whatever works for you, you should continue to do until the point where you can't do it anymore and you have to rethink outside the box. One cool tip on this fight is you can actually rescue somebody to the portal and you'll be able to get off 2 debuffs at once. So you can see here, I rescued Dumb Dwarf and both of our debuffs are cleared immediately. We do have 2 Evokers in this team, an Augmentation and an Enhanced Shaman, meaning that we can use Rescue twice. So you're going to see on the next one, Jazzy is going to go rescue Dumb Dwarf over to that portal and clear his debuff. I'm going to be sitting over here, and every single time on this fight that you have a debuff plus overlap from the Unbrittled Void is when you want to pop a defensive cooldown and start using some effective healing. So I clear, I life bind, and I start casting a Spirit Bloom, and my Spirit Bloom tops the party immediately, just in case somebody didn't clear. If your party doesn't clear, you're going to need to do a lot more healing here than I would have had to. My team understands this fight. We have 2 Evokers, which makes it kind of free, and we know the rescue trick. So what do you do if you don't have a rescue? What if you do if your team doesn't understand what's going on and you guys aren't clearing? You need to start preparing a healing ramp for this entire part of the fight. So there's 2 parts, right? You're going to have the part where the Void Corruption comes out, and you're just dealing with passive healing, and then sometimes you're going to deal with the Void Corruption plus the Circle. Anytime there's a Void Corruption plus Circle, that's when people get risked of getting gibbed or one-shot. So the dot's going to be ticking on them, they're not going to be topped, so you need to make sure that you're using a defensive on that, letting maybe your team clear, or watching your team's defensives to see if they're going to clear, or if you need to pop something big in your healing rotation. So you can see here, Frontal's going out, I use a Spirit Bloom, tops my party, and I'm just hitting the boss. But we have debuffs coming out here, what do? I go and clear, I echo, I try to echo, I clear, and I'm making sure I get some single target healing on my DK, making sure that he's topped for this upcoming circle. Release my stasis, and again, I don't think it really matters too much in this fight. Nobody's really ever in danger in this fight, as long as they're clearing now and again. And again, with rescue, it makes it an absolute joke. DKs can pre-AMS the dot as well. As you can see here, my DK just doesn't get one. I try to rescue Dumb Dwarf, but unfortunately it clears on its own. So that one we did make a mistake on, but it doesn't matter too much. This is one of the easier fights in the dungeon. We do have 2 minutes left, Lust is coming up in 30 seconds, and we're just kind of hanging out. I do really like this dungeon. It's probably my favorite dungeon to heal of the season, if not number 2. I think there's a lot of really good challenges here to heal. The trash and the start of the dungeon is really fun. I like the Mechanist. I think my DK does go down here. He was like next to the portal, wasn't clearing on him, but I do really like Skarmorak. I think this fight's kind of boring, but I think all the trash is like really good. I think it makes you really think about how you use your resources, how to use your buttons, and how to get through some of the more difficult healing checks. At this point, we're not even clearing here. I think I life bind, I set up a stasis, and we're just gonna sit here and kill the boss. I have a frontal on me, I blink, I rewind, and the boss is dead. Again, it's kind of been a minute since I posted a good video. I was away and was quite sick, but I did want to show you guys the breakdown here. This is what my breakdown looked like for this game. Tons of Spirit Bloom, tons of Afterimage procs, Life Bind are all my 3 biggest healing. Golden Hour is 4th, and as you can see, my Dream Breath is pretty low in this one. I find there's very barely any rot damage in this encounter other than Skarmorak, which actually feels it to be useful. Your Echo, Life Bind, Spirit Bloom should cover almost all the healing you need in this dungeon. Wanted to show something cool here too. Kind of looking through like the threads of fate damage and like my healing, but overall, again, I love this dungeon. Hopefully you guys had some good takeaways from this here. If you have any questions regarding some of the healing patterns, maybe some struggle points or something I didn't explain properly, feel free to drop something in the comments. I'll do my best to respond when I have some time. Again, thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.